Hey everyone, welcome to the new episode. So we have Bab this time with us, which will be like sharing some good experiences, how he has just developed the skill set into the digital world from the back end, like working in various companies, and now like just sharing his insights in AI. So hi Bab.
Hey Jay, really happy to
Hey,
meet.
same here. So before we'll start, I have like a very small question that I always ask to all my hosts is like, what was the first, like I'll say, the beginning for you to come in the tech? Because the field that you were in and the things you were doing in the past were very different. The roles that you were there. So what was your major, I'll say, the kickstart or the spark?
Yeah, that's completely fair. And I think my background is super weird. So hopefully maybe there's some people who could relate to it. So I think as a personality, I like a lot of things. I think I'm eclectic. I'm curious by nature, and I like to get my hands dirty, build stuff. So initially, I wanted to go into the business world to just build stuff. Um, Maybe I guess today you would call this being an entrepreneur, but back then it was just like wanting to do and create stuff. And so I initially did studies actually in economics. So I studied at Imperial College London and did a master's in economics. Before that, it was also like business studies. And yeah, throughout this entire journey, I built like a little startup. We raised a bit of money, and I was thinking that maybe I enjoyed the idea of building in the tech world. And so, actually, the first role I landed after university, and by the way, just to let you know, like the startup we wanted to do was like a bicycle sharing system, which turned out to become very, very successful, but it's just we didn't build that company, but like a Lime Bike and all of these big companies sort of like went into that direction. So we kind of like closed that company down. But yeah, the first experience, like official experience, was at Uber. I used to work in strategy, and it was just like a quick internship, and then I sort of like discovered like this thing called SQL, and I was like, oh, this is amazing. I feel like you can do some fun things, and then that led me to go into like um, learning about Python, and so essentially I just kind of like went to different tech companies, trying to continue to upskill myself as a non-engineer. A non-engineer that likes engineering stuff. And in the end, I ended up at TikTok, where I was doing work on like more like heavy analytic stuff, like maybe a bit of machine learning. And at TikTok, I started making TikTok videos like, hey, I don't know how to code, but I know how to code. So this is my journey. And that kind of like gathered a bit of a following. And then somebody was like, hey, you're a DevRel. And I was like, what is a DevRel? Never heard of this. He's like, oh, you make content about coding. And I was like, yeah, I really like that. He's like, yeah, there's a real job for that. And I think this is when you and I met, Jay, right? I went to work for a small startup called Quine, and then they rebranded to Kira. And so this is kind of like how I ended up there.
Yeah. Okay. So as like you're told that you have like done a lot of cool stuff. So like you went from operations at Volvo, then analytics in TikTok. So there is like a lot of worlds, if I say. So looking back, so it was a master plan or you were just following your curiosity?
It's a good question. And if some of the listeners out there are, say, still at university or like maybe first couple of years into your career, I would say that I did not have a master plan. I think I was very much drawn by like my curiosity and wanting to do better. Um, I would definitely say that there's this is how I would think of it in like two buckets. There's the first bucket of like, let's experiment, let's try out new things. And there's an argument for that. You should do that between the age of 20 and 30. You know, you should try different things. You should try to understand what you like and what you don't like. Um, and I think this is kind of like the bucket that I followed. But there's a second bucket that I've recently learned, and I think it's worth emphasizing that this is also something that could be very, very powerful if done right, is gaining an understanding early as to where you want to end up. And essentially, from this, work backward. So, realistically, what does this mean? It means you sit down with a piece of paper and you're like, I want my life to look like this. I want to be doing this. I want to, I don't know, earn this amount of money. And then you're like, okay, if I want X, Y, Z, let's work it backward. Like, by what time do I want to achieve this by? Do I have hard requirements? Like, this is the minimum amount of things that I would like. I'll give an example. Like, uh, I'm not super into money. I don't love money like so many people, but I still think it's important. So, like for instance, one of my requirements is I want to make sure that there's at least some intellectual, like uh, a challenge in what I do, and this is why engineering, DevRel makes sense, and this is why I've never went into finance. But depending on who listens to that, like if you make this exercise, it's like, okay, how much do I care about these things? And then you work things backward. And I would say that thinking with this second bucket, you could go much further in life. I mean, maybe not much further, but you could gain a lot more clarity very early in your life about what you want to do, just because you know exactly where you want to end up. And then once you have that and you have sort of like this North Star, this directional place you want to be in, like you are able to work very hard. You are able to like do better than other people around just because you have clarity. I hope that answers your question.
Yeah, like that's great to hear. Like the curiosity is the main key for us in tech to just do whatever we can do. So,
Absolutely.
like next, like I like to ask, like it is like related to your one of your jobs in TikTok. So, like TikTok was like one of your first big tech chapters, if I say. So, in terms of, I'll say those who like never worked before over there. So, how is the culture over there? Like, how other team members and employees are dedicated towards the company and working towards it?
Yeah, good question. I would say the TikTok culture is unique. It's owned by ByteDance, which is a Chinese company. So there is a heavy influence about this. In my case, I really liked it because sort of like, I mean, you know this, Jay, but for the people listening, I lived like 14 years in China when I was a child. So I'm very accustomed to the Chinese culture. So I really, really enjoyed it. But that said, I think one thing that I was yearning for is that TikTok is now a mammoth. It's a very, very big company. And personally, if you, and for people that are interested by this, like if you want to really build things fast and feel like you have like heavy ownership and responsibilities, it can take a lot longer to get to that stage at TikTok because there's so many people. So I think this is where a startup makes a lot more sense. But as a big tech company that has a fantastic product, if you have the chance to work there, I definitely think it's very much worth doing, and the experience you gain from it is super super valuable.
Okay. So, like very glad to know about that how the culture is working in TikTok. So, Next comes with one of your favorite rules that is on Devil. So, like, Koira was like one of your real Devil move. That was, I think, so one of your first jobs in Devil that has helped you to kickstart the things. So, how did you find Devil as a career, and why you just did it? Why it like clicked to you?
Yeah. So I sort of stumble upon it. So
Mhm.
when working for TikTok in analytics as essentially a technical stakeholder within the team, I realized that I fell into a technical role from a background that's non-technical, and I thought that I could do a bit of like two birds, one stone, whereby I can become more technical by sharing what I've learned, but also try to understand more about the TikTok product as a whole. And so I started making videos there. I think one thing that was very cool as well is somebody in my team, like the strategy team, had 650,000 followers. Um, and it has nothing to do with strategy. She made like a Korean and Chinese cuisine. It looked really, really nice. And so she's the one that gave me this advice, like, the way to build up an account is by following different trends on TikTok and kind of like twisting the trend and saying what you have to say or share what you have to say. And so I would take very famous trends and talk about coding things. Very often it would be more like for entertainment, but sometimes it would be like, oh, today I learned how to do, I don't know, a moving average on Matplotlib, something like this. Um, and funny enough, when I would sometimes get things wrong, and people would be commenting like, "No, you should not do this. You're stupid." This is when some videos would go, viral. So yeah, I essentially started building content, technical content, and this allowed me to sort of like pierce into the DevRel world, but sort of like not doing it on purpose. Somebody, I think, mentioned that there was these openings for these technical content creator roles, which are developer relations or developer advocate. So this is kind of like how I got into it. So maybe one advice I would give, because ultimately this is definitely a niche role, uh, building up to be a DevRel is very much into like you already build content about engineering, or you attend events and you talk about it and you build communities. I mean, yourself, Jay, right? Like you've built like a wonderful engineering community. Like those are characteristics and requirements for becoming a DevRel. It's one of these peculiar role where yeah, you don't become DevRel by going to university. But going to university with computer science degree is helpful, but there's that additional part that's very, very hard to get, and it's just like starting to organically build stuff that's relevant for the space.
Okay. So based on this, I have one follow question. So like Devil sits at a weird intersection, part marketing, part engineering, and part community.
Yeah,
How did you figure out your own version of what Devil means?
it's a good question. So when we worked together, right, at Kira, I think you were very much leading the community, and I was very much building up the content arm for Kira. And we definitely worked a lot together on building different initiatives to bring more exposure of the Kira product to different engineering communities. I would say it's sort of through the professional experience that I got to understand, like, I like the content arm. I also really enjoy the community arm, but like I think people that are way more talented than me, like you, do a better job there. But in my current role right now with Tessl, there is exactly as you said, still that Venn diagram of like community, the marketing and content, and the engineering. And the reality is, everybody in the DevRel team uh, sort of like touches on all of these circles. But yeah, everyone has maybe leans towards one of them, one of the circles, or two of these circles a little bit more. Um, so I would say it's ultimately based on your preference and your experience.
Okay. So next, it's about your current role, Tessl. So like now you're at Tessl building Devil for an AI native developer tool company. What exactly is the problem Tessl is solving? Explain it like you are talking to a developer who is skeptical about AI tools.
Yeah, it's uh, it's definitely the case for a lot of people now
Mm.
that there's still, I think, a very healthy pushback with what's happening with the space. So the problem that a lot of developers, I mean, actually all developers with AI are facing, is the problem that you leverage AI to help you code, but you don't know whether or not that code works. You can run it, and if it passes the test and the code runs, that's fantastic. But sometimes, as we know, there's the concept of hallucinations. Um, the agent could be hallucinating an API endpoint, or just miswriting functions, although those are like now more rare. But that's a fundamental problem. Like if you are working with a bank or a insurance company where the quality of the code is extremely important because you're dealing with high stakes projects, it's it's essential to make sure that AI is steered in the right way. So that's the problem. Agents going off and doing crazy stuff in a one-liner. The way we are approaching this right now is you essentially can evaluate agents uh, and you can evaluate their behavior uh, before they even do anything. So Anthropic has recently, Anthropic, the parent company behind Claude and Claude Code, um, recently essentially evangelized and promoted the Skill.md. The Skill.md is essentially a very simple markdown file that you provide to an agent, and inside it is just like how you want the agent to behave. So you can have code review skill.md, you can have linter specific linter.mds, you can have front end design skill.md. You can have many different types of them, and those help the agent be steered in the way you want. Um, Inside of them, by the way, you can also have non-technical skills, like you can have like design skill.md, which are used by engineers because they conform to the policies and the branding of the company. So skill.md is basically, as a whole, a context file that you help and give to agents. Tessl provides the evaluation of those skills.md. And those are done in two ways. The first way is what we call like a simple review score. So we essentially feed your skill into our review score evaluation, and we compare it and contrast it to the Anthropic best practices for how it's structurally made. Um, so this is how to make sure the agent best reads your skill, making sure that it's tight, that it's concise, that every single function that needs to be highlighted are highlighted in the right way. And that essentially helps you understand like how well the skill is ready to be leveraged. Um, then we have something that's a little bit, actually, maybe something I should say is like when you essentially feed your skill.md to Tessl, um, if anyone is interested, you can go on docs.tessl.io and you can sort of like understand how to go about reviewing your skill. Although now the funny bit is the easiest thing now is you just open up Cloud Code or Codex or whatever, and you just say, hey, here's my skill.md. Can you look into Tessl and its documentation and just review my skill and optimize my skill? Like now, it's just incredible. Now those things just work perfectly. But yeah, so like this is on the review side. You can give it, Tessl will provide a score out of 100%, and you can sort of like give it improvements by saying like Tessl skill review dash dash optimize, or again, you just point it to Cloud Code. This is how to optimize your skill. Something else now that goes a little bit deeper, and I think would be appreciated by many engineering folks here, is you want to understand, especially when you start dealing with like large code bases or that deal with sensitive information, that the context is used correctly and that actually providing a skill.md provides an uplift in performance. And for that, we have created what we call like task-based evaluation or scenario-based evaluation. And essentially what it does is we have an LLM as a judge that goes into your skills and that generates different real life scenarios of how the agent is going to perform if it has the skill or if it doesn't have the skill, but for the same question, the same task. And you get a real life view by seeing the results as to one, oh, actually using the skill here has definitely improved for XYZ scenario. But sometimes even the opposite, like sometimes the agent by itself is already smart enough and actually providing too much context can reduce the performance of the agent. Evidently for this, you are also able to create your own scenario. Like if you are owner of a huge project with a large code base, you know exactly the edge cases you want to test against. So that is also possible. And yeah, same thing here. If you want to give it a try, just spin up Cloud Code, point it to docs.tessl.io and just ask to run a task evaluation. Does that make sense to you, Jay?
Yes, that's like a very deep thing that how and like what Tessl is actually doing. So I'll be asking one of the interesting questions now. Is like, what does a day you think like as you're a developer? So as a developer or as a developer person, how does the workflow you see around you or within you, that how it is different from the roles in terms of the responsibilities?
Do you mean this as a DevRel or more as a developer?
So it's like developer versus developer.
Sure. So I think as a developer, and again, I do want to say this answer is more because people I know of and all my colleagues are developers, and this is what they tell me. So I'll just separate the question in two. For developers, what I'm seeing, at least in our company, which is very much at the edge of AI, is people now leverage agents to write 90 to 95% of their code. We have now these Slack threads where somebody reports a bug, and all we do is we say, add Claude, fix that. That opens up a linear issue ticket. Claude goes and builds the entire fix, raises a pull request, and then our job as developers is more on the reviewing side. So we automate a massive amount of pull requests. And I think in terms of giving some sort of numbers, I think we at some point were at like 50 pull requests per week before as a team, something along those lines. And I think a couple of weeks later, we were at like 300 pull requests. And that's without hiring new people. It's just like the pace at which we are able to code and ship has just dramatically increased. On the DevRel side, what I'm seeing a lot of changes in the workflow is the building of valuable content alongside AI. If we go back to the idea of like the Skill.md, I have now built, like the article reviewer Skill.md or the article creator Skill.md with all the policies, the branding, the way I like to write, the tone of voice, and like the things to mention, the SEO best practices, etc., etc. So I think the common theme there is like AI has really helped us automate and increase the amount of like things we can ship. I think that's kind of like the main thread.
Okay, so next I'd like to ask is like AI in dev tools is booming right now in the industry. So there's like also a lot of noise. What separates the tool that will like actually matters from the one that are just riding the hype?
It's a good question. Actually, initially we had at the AI native dev. I should
Mhm.
have mentioned this, by the way. So, um, I work for Tessl, and Tessl has built a community called the AI native dev community. Most of my responsibilities lie in with helping the AI native dev community grow. We educate and share best practices about how to become an AI native developer, share news, trends, and how to use some of the latest tools. So, to that point, I am seeing a consolidation within the market now of who are the big players. I think 6 months ago, you asked me that question, I would have said, no idea. Things are just popping off. I'm keeping track of a billion tools. But now I would say the main IDs are Cursor. I haven't heard too much about Windsurf recently, but Cursor is the big one. In terms of the agents, obviously, you have Opus 4.6 with Claude. I think you have GPT 5.3 now with Codex and Cursor's agent, which I think I haven't heard as much. Like 6 months ago, everything was Cursor. Now it's more like GPT versus Claude. Gemini is definitely a good tool, I have heard, although I haven't played too much with it. But yeah, Gemini is also in the race. So those are kind of like the big models that not everybody uses. In terms of like the CLI, Warp is definitely one of the big contenders. But also, I think a lot of people just use their local terminal. But Warp is definitely the big one there. In terms of working for agent parallelization, Conductor is the one tool that I'm seeing a lot. Obviously, there's now a lot of like swarm agent abilities directly within Claude or like cloud agents, I think, inside Cursor. So those are definitely things that are interesting. And then obviously Tessl is a tool that's now picking up. So you make sure that you evaluate your agents and you evaluate the agent's skills or the context before you sort of like release it out there. On maybe like the non-engineering front, the very, very famous tool that I would advise is obviously Granola. Granola is a tool that allows you to record meeting notes. And so those are helpful for developers because you understand what has been discussed, what has been actioned, and what are the features you need to build. So I very often just like copy paste the transcript of Granola because I think their agent is not as good. put it into Cloud Code and then let Cloud Code run with it. And obviously linear for submitting your tickets. So those are things are now like kind of like the consolidated tools in the space. There's definitely more, but I think this is kind of like what I'm seeing here on the ground.
Okay. So like my next question will be like very related to like the devil stuff. Is like if you had to distill everything, the pivots, the orgs, the content, the devil grinned into one framework or mindset that drives you, what would it be?
So the way I'm understanding the question is, what would be, in light of everything that's happening, the sort of like new mindset that excites me about being a DevRel? Is that how I'm supposed to understand this?
Yes.
Gotcha. Um, I think this is probably like it's a good question, and I would say that my answer would be the same if it was a question of like how can developers sort of like protect themselves against this new age of AI, because this is what they've also told me, when I asked the question to my colleagues. I think we've officially entered the year of the generalist. So that means like right now, if you're a developer, you can be a designer and you can be a product manager. If you're a product manager, you can be a designer and a coder, vice versa. There's like a bit of like a Mexican standoff, or like, the Spider-Man, like it's very much like the capabilities are there now to just become builders. And I think this is where the thread is common with DevRel, which is, and I'll give an example to illustrate this. When we worked together, say a couple years back, I don't think I would have had the expertise to go on an afternoon and just change the code base because something was going wrong. I do that now as a DevRel. I directly go and write a piece of content, and there's something that I'm referring to in my article that's to do with the code base, but the code base has an issue. And I just go and spin up Cloud Code and I say, this is some of the issues, leverage the, like the test-driven skill, and leverage the code review skill to make sure that whatever changes you're going to do have strong tests and it makes sense and it passes any sort of like security requirements that we have. Raise the PR, and that's it. And so I've created a content piece. I've been an engineer within for like 20 minutes because the ability to write code is not my strongest suit, but understanding the architecture and just being able to review to a very low level, like obviously I'm changing very small things, make it that I was still able to do it. I bring in an engineer to review this. And then, yeah, in like an hour, all of this was done. So I think we're entering this year, the year of the generalist, where you are able to build, you are able to put on different hats, and you're able to like explore different things that you couldn't have done before. And I think that's what's very exciting in DevRel, but also what's very exciting for software development.
Okay. So this will be like one of the final questions for this podcast. Like, what's next for BAP? What are you building towards that you haven't told about publicly yet?
An exclusive, huh? I think I'm very excited about the direction that we're taking it with the AI native dev community and Tessl. I think the idea of evaluating agents, behavior and ultimately evaluating and improving their output is reaching a bit of a consensus. Like, just to let you know, Anthropic recently has embedded evaluation of skills in their skill-creator. Similarly, Gemini and Google are working also on this. So there's a lot of validation in the space that you can't just let your agent do things, even though the model is very strong. You need to build steering. So right now, it seems like it's standardizing that this is the Skill.md, and that you need to evaluate those skills and make sure that they work well. So I think the Tessl product is something that I'm very excited about and that I think is showing a lot of traction. So definitely something to go play with as a developer, but as a DevRel advocating for this product, I find it very, very easy. So it's like it's quite aligned with where with what I'm doing. And then as I would say, like, the angle that we are building the AI native dev community is like super, super fun. Like, in June, we'll invite folks from around the world because we have a conference that will happen in London on June 1st and 2nd. So it's the AI native DevCon. So happy for anyone to join. It will be in London for like live, but if you can't be in London, you can just join from around the world. And like, as an educator or like a creator at heart, it really is exciting to just be able to share like what's happening. And the thing is, I can't even tell you what exactly will be in June, because between now and June, you don't know what's going to happen. But yeah, so I think that's what's next for me, and I'm very excited about it. I think it's going to be a very, very cool year. Yeah, the year of the generalist. It's for anyone to grab it.
I thanks, Gav, for today's podcast and taking your time out. So that's all, viewers, from my end, and I'll be meeting you in the next episode with more content related to AI.
Cheers.
Just